Okay, good morning, everyone. Shukar for joining. We are holding here in the Gemara in Mesechta, Megillah, Daf Tes Vav Amid Aleph 15a. The Gemara here is explaining the Megillah at the end of chapter 4, the beginning of chapter 5. So right now at this point in the Megillah, we are at the end of chapter 4. At the end of chapter 4, we have the instructions of Mordechai to Esther to go to the king and to plead for the Jews. Esther responds to him, if you want me to do that, go gather all the Jews in the entire city of Shushan, fast for me for 3 days and 3 nights. Me and my maidens will fast as well, and therefore I will come to the king without permission. If I perish, I perish. It says Mordechai passed, and he did everything which Esther had said. So now we're discussing this Gemara. The Gemara is discussing this part of the Megillah. It says, so the Gemara says, Vayavar Mordechai, and Mordechai passed through. What does it mean, Vayavar, and he passed through? Amar Rav says, Shehevir Yoim Rishon Shel Pesach B'tainis. The word Vayavar, and he passed, comes from the term Avera. Vayavar means, and he sinned. Mordechai passed the first day of Pesach with a fast, meaning the 3 fast days, the 3 days of the fast were either the 13th, 14th, and 15th of Nisan, or according to Rashi and according to the Tiferes, it's 14th, 15th, and 16th of Nisan. On the first day of Pesach, that's when the fast took place. That means the Jewish people did not have a Seder that Pesach. They did not eat, they did not drink. Instead of having Sudas Yom Tiv, a meal of Yom Tiv, they fasted that day. So what is it? Does that mean they did not fulfill the mitzvah of matzah at all? Yonis and Eibschitz writes that it was still possible for them to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, because to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, all you need to eat is a kazayas, the size of an olive, and in order to consider to be breaking a fast, you need to eat a keseves, the size of 2 kazayases, a kibetza, the size of an egg, the size of 2 olives. So it's possible that the Jewish people could have eaten matzah if they ate just matzah with nothing else. However, the Mordechai's a Rishon, and he explains that the reason why Mordechai said they should fast even on Yom Tiv. And Mordechai heard in a dream, and this is what Rashi says, Balach Aloim. He was told by the man in the dream that about the decree, and he was agreeable from Shemayim, from heaven, that they could fast on Yom Tov as well. Now, since Mordechai heard in a fast that the Jewish people, as a decree happened from the Balach Aloim, from the fast. If you look at the Rashi over here, Mordechai knew what had transpired. Look at the Rashi. I'll just zoom it in a little bit. Who told him? Balach Aloim, the master dreams, told Mordechai. And there's a halacha that you're allowed to fast a tainis chalam, a fast for a bad dream on Yom Tov, because it's considered to be a tainug pleasure, because you're fasting to negate the bad dream.
I have a great story about a tainis chalam.
Maybe so we could get to it soon. So Mordechai decreed the Jewish people to fast on Yom Tov similar to a tainis chalam, a tainis for a dream. So that means he transgressed, and he had to, by Yom Tov, by making the Jews fast on Yom Tov. Rav Shlomo Kluger writes a very interesting thing. And also the Kamana Rebbe expands on this. It says, in order for a tzaddik, for a holy person, in order for them to help people in their generation, they are by themselves much greater than the people of their generation. They have to lower themselves down to their daga, their level. the famous story of the Mittler Rebbe. At one time, good morning, Mike. One time, the Mittler Rebbe had yichidus with many people, and in the middle of the yichidus, he stopped, and he did not let. He said the yichidus is stopping for several hours, and ended up being more than several hours, an entire night, an entire next day. And rumors started coming out that somehow the Mittler Rebbe is crying, and he's saying Tehillim, and he's fasting. And for 2 full days, the Mittler Rebbe fasted and said Tehillim and cried, and nobody knew what was happening. And much, much later on, when afterwards Mittler Rebbe started taking yichidus again, the people found out what it is that there was somebody who did a very big avera, a very big sin. And the Mittler Rebbe says that the way a Rebbe helps someone who sinned is by finding inside of themselves something similar to that avera, to that sin. And this person had such a strong avera, such a strong sin. And if anybody wants to ask me after the shiur, I can tell you what it is, written in the Rishimus of the Rebbe. What a particular person was yichidus by the Mittler Rebbe sinned, and the Mittler Rebbe could not find in himself anything remotely similar to what this person did, and therefore he did teshuvah and he fasted and he said Tehillim for several days until he found in himself, in a very, very, very subtle way, some type of connection to that avera, to that sin. The connection to that avera the Mittler Rebbe found in himself was that there was a certain coin which had the image of there was a Tsarina. Yekaterina was her name, right?
Oh, I mean, Catherine the Great.
Catherine the Great.
Yeah.
So Yekaterina, the city of Yekaterinoslav is named after her. So there, and she wasn't a very tzniya, she wasn't the paradigm of tzniya. She wasn't a Beis girl at all. And so there was a coin which had her image on it, and she wasn't dressed tznius on the coin. And Mittler Rebbe would never, he never looked at any coin. He says he didn't know the tzuras matbeh, didn't know what coins look like. But he didn't even touch that coin. And there's one time somebody put a pidyon, a chassid put a pidyon on his table with a bunch of coins, and Mittler Rebbe swept all of them off the table. And with the sleeve, he touched that coin as well. And that's how he found some type of similarity to this person's avera. So in a similar sense, to say, Gemara writes about Moshe Rabbeinu. When the Jews sinned in the Chet Egel, the golden calf, how could Moshe Rabbeinu ask Hashem to atone for them if Moshe Rabbeinu had no connection to them whatsoever? And that's when Moshe Rabbeinu went. He says he broke the luchos. It says in the Gemara that if somebody breaks kelim, breaks any vessel out of anger, it is similar to avodah zarah, similar to idol worship. Moshe Rabbeinu breaking the luchos, so we had in a very subtle sense, a similar sense, idea of avodah zarah. And that's how he was able to daven to Hashem for the Jewish people. A shliach tzibor, chazan, cannot be motzi somebody unless he himself is also obligated, right? For example, a child cannot be motzi an adult for kiddush, and so on. You have to also, in order to fulfill someone's obligation, motzi somebody, you have to be chayav, obligated in it yourself. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to break the luchos. And Mordechai, in a similar sense, the Jewish people went against the will of Hashem. And so Mordechai, what he had to do was he abolished Pesach, he abolished the Seder, he abolished Simchas Yom Tov. He himself had to do an avera, so to speak. It's called Vayaver Mordechai. Mordechai had to pass in order to break the decree of Haman. The Minchas Elazar, the Munkatcher Rebbe, he brings down from Pirkei de Rebbe Elazar. Pirkei de Rebbe Elazar is one of the very first Midrashim ever written down. Rebbe Elazar Modai. And he brings a conversation between Mordechai and Esther. Esther said, make a fast for 3 days. And Mordechai sent back to Esther, but now is Erev Pesach. How can we make a fast on Pesach? And Esther answered back, Im ein, if there's no Jews, who is Pesach for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Meaning, now is the time to fast. So the Minchas Elazar writes, this is what the conversation was. In Shemayim, every single night, every single year, on the night of Pesach in heaven, when the Jews get together and the Jews say drink the 4 cups of wine and eat matzah, there's such a tumult in Shemayim, such a tumult in heaven, a huge simcha, an amazing kiddush Hashem, what's happening. And now that Pesach, suddenly, Dead quiet. It's quiet. It's like you're in Grand Central Station, deafening noise, and suddenly all the trains come to a stop. Right? What's happening here? And they're going to see what they're missing in Shemayim, in heaven. And that's what's going to break the decree. The second answer over here is Shmuel. Shmuel says, the Avar Arkuma de Maya. He crossed over a stream of water. Now, there's let me just, okay, let's start off. I'll go like this. New share screen, because I'm going to be skipping around screens from here to there. This picture, here's the picture of a map of Shushan. One of the first pictures that I had over here. Here's a map of Shushan. Zoom in a little bit. Here's Achashverosh's palace. That's where the party was, Apanda, the main gate where Mordechai would sit. The women's quarter is over there. Here is called the river Shiur. It's a river which has several names, called the river Shiur. It has the river Ulai. This is where Daniel is buried till today, in the middle of a town called Shush. There's a river going right next to the city of Shushan, and they dug a moat. There's about 250 acres wide is the entire area of the palace of Achashverosh. They put 3 hills together in order to make one large area for a palace, and they made a moat around his palace. Now, people will not be able to enter his palace without permission. So that is there's a river right next to Achashverosh. Let's do a new share. Back to the Gemara. Here. I'll have a stop share. Go back to the Gemara. So here is also how it is currently in maps. It's Shushan, the Persian city. That's the palace, and this is the river. The river Ulai is in Daniel. Here it is in Daniel. This is the parak base of that parak Ches. He says, in the 3rd year of the king of Belshazzar, I had a vision. I, Daniel, I saw in my vision. It came to pass, and I saw. Ani b'Shushan habira. I was in Shushan, the capital. Asher be'elam Medina, which is in the province of Elam. At that point, it already started being built up as a capital of a different kingdom. And this is right before Darius went and he killed Darius the Mede, and he went and he killed Belshazzar. So I was in Shushan, the capital. I saw in a vision. I was on the river Ulai, Ulai River. So the Ulai River, here's a picture of the Ulai River today. It's right next to the ruins of Achashverosh's palace. It's called the Karkesh River. This is Daniel's tomb. It's Daniel buried in the middle of the city, and you can see right behind him is a river. That's part of the river Ulai. The what?
The tomb, is it?
That is the cone sticking out over there. That's where according to them, they say Daniel is buried there. All right, so this is the area of the palace itself. If you could see, there's an area moat, and there was an area to separate the city. The king wanted to be separate. He had in Europe, every castle had a moat, and every moat had, of course, had alligators inside, right? So there was so he had to cross the city. Now, if you remember learning before that there was Yehudi Haya b'Shushan Abira, there was a Jewish man in Shushan. What does that mean? In Shushan, the capital, there was one Jewish man, Mordechai. In Shushan, this city, Ir Shushan, he had many Jews. In Shushan, Abira in Shushan, the capital, right? So the city of Shushan would be over here. So that's next to the river. There were many Jews. Mordechai had to cross over the river, the body of water, in order to go back to the Jews. So Mordechai passed over. Vayavar Mordechai. The second opinion of Shmuel is he passed over a stream of water in order to bring the message. A fascinating explanation on this, which comes from the Zohar. which says like this, and it has both of these explanations to work together. Both of these meanings, that Mordechai passed over the river, and he also transgressed Yom Tov. He transgressed, saying that you should fast on Yom Tov. Esther, it says in the Zohar, never actually had relations with Achashverosh. Every single time, Esther put a shade, a demon, right? One of these creatures, and Esther transplanted him, put him to be there instead of her. And right, so Esther never actually had physical intimacy, according to the Zohar, with Achashverosh.
Did what? She had someone that looked like her, you said?
A shade, a demon that looked like her. And Esther, being a Neviah, she was a prophetess, she was able to summon a shade. And every time Achashverosh had intimate relations was with this shade, with this demon.
Nice.
So that's what the Zohar says. We mentioned this before. Now, Mordechai receives a letter from Esther saying you should fast on the first fast, including the days of Pesach, you should fast. So Mordechai is not sure if this message is from Esther herself, or if this message is maybe from the shed, from the demon. And the demon, he wants to make an accusation against the Jews, make it even worse for them, and have the Jews fast on Yom Tov. So therefore, what did Mordechai do? He went with this letter from Esther, and he crossed Arkuma Demaye, he crossed the water. In order to disable the power of Tumah, you go to fresh water, living water, a valid mikveh, right? From Tumah, you go to Tara, you go to a mikveh. Many stories of the Baal Shem Tov about how there was a Jew who was, for whatever reason, was being harassed by a non-Jewish priest who knew black magic, and he shot arrow, and Baal Shem Tov traveled to him, and he told him to go into a barrel of rainwater, and every time this person would shoot a poison arrow at him, and it would miss him every time he would go into the water, but this person kept on shooting, and he told him to stick his finger out of the water, and then his finger fell off, and he saw blood. I'm just skimming through the story. In short, more recent times, in France, there was a certain young Jewish man who got caught up in a Indian cult, and it's a very interesting, fascinating story of the Rebbe. This story happened like around the year 1990, 91. Very fascinating story with many details. A person was caught up in a certain cult in India. They would extort money from people, but there are different levels, and they use powers of Tumah. And the Rebbe, they wrote to the Rebbe about it. This person, the young man, eventually wanted to leave this cult, and they wrote to the Rebbe about it. They had a thing: if you're in there, you're stuck for life. And they had different levels. One is that metal doesn't harm you, etc. And so the Rebbe said that he should speak to the Rav in France. His name was Rabbi Pevsner. And this cult kept on sending threatening letters to his house in France. Like, you have to come back, or we're going to use our powers and we're going to harm you. And certain things would happen to him. He got into car accidents. Certain things would happen to him. And there was somebody else from that cult who one time a fire happened in his house, and he was laying on his mattress at home. He burnt to death, but the mattress was not burnt. Saying someone tried leaving that cult. So and one of the things that Rabbi Pevsner told him to do was any letter you get from them, not to bring into your house, instead to put it into water, to put it into rainwater, because rainwater takes away tumah. And they kept on doing this until there was one time that the parents were not in the house, and the letter came, and they brought the letter inside. As soon as the letter came inside, this young man started screaming and crying, I want to go back to India. So then the story is they brought him to the Rebbe. You can see by dollars, the Rebbe is whispering something. The Rebbe whispered the words. Well, in Parshas Balak, there's no sorcerers, no magic among the Jewish people. And eventually, this person became a full Baal Tshuva. They threatened to kill him and gave him a certain date that you're going to be harmed. And after he went by the Rebbe, said they weren't scared anymore. And that day passed, nothing happened. Became a full Baal Tshuva. A very interesting story. But the idea is that Meg Shamim, rainwater or fresh water, has a power to be mevatel, to abolish magic, sorcery. There's another thing that It says in Gemara that there was a certain Tana which went to a city where everyone in the city was sorcerers, was a woman who would do magic in that city, and he bought a camel, and he's riding the camel, and in the middle of the camel went to drink fresh water. Suddenly the camel turned into a woman. Right? It was, who was it? It was really a machshefa, a witch, a magician, and she turned herself into a donkey. And when he was, and as soon as she got in touch with fresh water, suddenly she wasn't able to do the trick anymore. She wasn't, the tumah went away.
We said the story as far as the figure of, was it actually the priest who's figure?
No, the Jew. The Jew. Baal Shem Tov told him to go into water. I can send you the story after the class.
I'm trying to forget. Actually, why the figure would fall off?
Because he stuck it out of the water.
Oh.
Stuck it out of the Baal Shem Tov told him to stick it out of the water because he's not going to be appeased until this priest could see blood.
Oh, I see.
My story, you can tell Mordechai was not about it.
Why?
My first wife began to have this really scary dream.
Yeah.
It was so scary. Night after night, she had the same dream, and she wouldn't tell me. She wouldn't tell me what it was. I said to her, "Listen, maybe we should do the Tainas Cholim."
Yeah.
So I went to the Rav, Nefesh Shapiro, who was my, Sevach Rav. I picked Rabbi because he was like, whenever I would show him something that happened from the Igros, he would say, "Oh, hair of that Mishagas."
Yeah.
I told him the thing. He looked at me like I was, from Mars. He said, "What?" He says, "Was a tiny scholar chas v'sholom." He says, "Tonight she should stand by her bed, and before she goes to sleep, she should say out loud, 'I don't care what happens. I'm not fasting.'"
Yeah. And it went away. Very interesting. Your Mayor Abtson, I don't know if you remember him, Mayor Abtson, when he was in jail in Russia, he was together with another chassid, I think it was a Yankel Zurevitcher, another chassid together. And one morning he wakes up, he said he had a very scary dream that all of his teeth fell out one by one. And the chassid was in the same prison cell as him, told him, "I had the exact same dream last night." So they decided to fast, and they had a Tainas Cholim together. Anyways, and I said, Baruch Hashem, it says that the fast takes away the effects of a bad dream.
Right.
So Mordechai, what he wanted, so by going through the water, that was his test to see if it was written by a shade, if it had the power of Tumah in the water, then it would disintegrate, it would fall apart. But if it would pass over the water, then you could see it was written by Esther. So through going over the water, right, the answer is Shmuel. That's how he knew he should fast for 3 days, fast including the days of Pesach. So the two answers actually complement each other. And that's why it's important for us to know Mordechai passed over the river. So it's important to know. It's also another thing that a leader of a generation has to go out to the people of the generation. He has to connect to them. It says, Hein kel kabir lo yimas. Hashem will not look away from the tefillas of the prayers of the tzibur. So Esther told him, go together with all the Jews. And don't be over here in Shushan Abira trying in Shushan, the capital. Rather go to the Jews and go with everybody else. Also, it's possible that the Jews who were further away were not part of the meal, the feast of Achashverosh. And therefore they would not sin. Since they never sinned with the feast of Achashverosh, therefore their prayers will be answered better. Let's continue the Gemara. We mentioned over here the Tosfos on the page. Tosfos says, why didn't Mordechai just divorce Esther? And so the answer he gave was that it will become public. The answer is, couldn't Mordechai find 2 Jews in the entire city that he could trust, that will never divulge the secret that he's divorcing Esther? He was scared it will become public, and then Achashverosh was a very sensitive person. If his wife wouldn't come on time to the party, he would kill her. Right? He was a very person who didn't have a very large temper, long temper. And so he finds out that Mordechai divorced his wife with Esther, he'll kill Mordechai. But Mordechai couldn't find 2 Jews who were trustworthy, so he brings the Yenis and Eibshitz brings the Gemara, Mesechta Gittin, which brings halacha. It says that if there are two people in the city who have the same name, Gemara says Yosef ben Shimon. If one of them divorces his wife, the other one has to be present at the same time, because otherwise they're going to say it was this person who divorced his wife, not that one. So in order to not to have any doubts and not to have any complications, both have to be present. So he says the fact from the Megillah has to say it's Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish has to go 4 generations, shows you that there were multiple people with the name Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi. So there would be multiple people with the same name. So he would have to call them all to be present at this at this divorce. And then once that happens, so then there's no way to keep the secret anymore. You don't know who these people are. So therefore, he instead did not divorce Esther at all. And this was Esther saying, Kasher avadati, I will be lost in this world. Shlomo Kluger writes, I will be lost in the world to come as well.
What in the world to come?
Avadi from this world, avadati in the world to come.
But actually, how literal can we take that? Because another she was doing something that needed to be done.
Right.
How literal can we take that then?
So how could Esther be taken away from the world to come?
Yeah.
So obviously she was saying, what Esther was saying, at least from her viewpoint, is if I'm going willingly to Achashverosh, I'm scared I'm going to lose the world to come, but I'm willing to do that in order to save the Jews.
I mean, obviously she mentioned every word. I mean, maybe in the beginning, like sort of she had him, it's a natural thing in 11 months, to get cleaned up, but to say that she did. And she get rewarded for what she did. That seems to be counterintuitive.
Right. I understand where she's coming from. Until now, she never was willingly with Achashverosh. A very interesting thing that Shlomo Kluger points out over here. Maybe we'll do this, and maybe 2 more lines of Gemara, and then we'll go to Kuntres Umaayon. The entire Megillah until now, we never mentioned Esther. We called her Esther. We never called her Esther Hamalka, Esther the Queen. When's the first time we call her Esther Hamalka, Esther the Queen? Only in Parakeh in chapter 5. It says on the 3rd day, Esther went, she stood in front of the king, entered the king without permission. And Vayihi Cheres HaMelech as Esther Hamalka Imed Dis B'Chatzer. It came to pass when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court. That's the first time we call her Queen Esther. Why? Until that time, the Gemara calls her Karka Olam. She was passive. She never once initiated with Achashverosh in all the years that they were married. She never once wanted to be with Achashverosh. Whenever anything was done to her, it was done against her will. That's why she was not prohibited to Mordechai, because it was done all against her will. This now, when she's approaching the king of her own free volition or of her own accord, this is now when she's suddenly becoming the queen at this point. Why? Because now she wants a position. Now she's going to use that position to try to help and save the Jews. So that's why the first time she's called Esther Hamalka, Esther the Queen, is only at this point. Meaning she never fully accepted it yet until now. So now that she's willingly submitting and becoming the Queen, Achashverosh, so now she's saying, now avadati, now I'm losing my portion in the world to come. Until now, I was Esther, the wife of Mordechai, a good Jewish woman. But now I'm becoming the queen of Persia. And now I'm becoming the wife of Achashverosh. Now I'm scared I'm going to lose avadati, my portion in the world to come as well. But I'm going to do it in order to save another fellow Jew. Story of the Baal Shem Tov, that there was one time a certain older Jewish couple, which I think the Baal Shem Tov stayed by them once on one of his journeys, and they were very, very nice and hospitable and going out of their way to help the Baal Shem Tov. And Baal Shem Tov asked, "What could I help you with?" And they told him, "We were married so many years and we don't have any children. We would love to, please give us a bracha to have children." And Baal Shem Tov guaranteed them, "I guarantee you, Mitzvah Hashem, you will have a baby in the coming year." In Shemayim, in heaven, it was a very big tumult. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings his story. And how could it be? This couple was not worthy at all of having children. And how could the Baal Shem Tov say that they're going to have children? They have to listen to what the Baal Shem Tov says, because Tzaddik Goizer, Because Baruch Mekayim, it's how they decrees, and Hashem listens. Hashem fulfills. So they said the Baal Shem Tov will now lose his portion in Olam Haba, the world to come. They're going to fulfill what the Baal Shem Tov decreed, but he's going to lose his chelek, his portion in the world to come. And you're not allowed to decree anything on a tzaddik without his consent. No, and a tzaddik doesn't pass away until they agree to it. So they told the Baal Shem Tov, informed him of this decree that they're going to lose a portion in the world to come. Baal Shem Tov heard this, and he became so happy, so besimcha. He says, Baruch Hashem, I'm so happy now. He says, until now, whenever I'm doing any mitzvah, I'm trying my hardest that it should be l'shma, for the sake of Hashem, not for any ulterior motive, including reward. But who knows if I'm really doing it l'shma, really doing it for the sake of Hashem. But now that I'm told I have no portion in Olam Haba, in the world to come, so now whenever I do a mitzvah, it's totally l'shma, totally for the sake of Hashem. Baal Shem Tov was so happy, so besimcha. When Shemayim saw this and heaven saw this, it says they changed it and said, okay, now you can have back your chilek in Olam Haba, your portion in the world to come.
Whereas Elisha ben Avuya, he was told when she we lost her portion, said, oh, in that case, I'm going to be enjoying this world. So,
Okay, well, let's do the next 3 lines of Gemara, explaining the next beginning of the next chapter, the next parak of the Megillah. It says, "Vayhi b'yom hashlishi." It came to pass on the 3rd day that tilbash Esther malchus. Esther clothed herself in royal garments. V'tamid, and she stood b'chatzar beis hamelech hapnimius, in the inner courtyard of the king's palace. Noichach beis hamelech, opposite the house of the king. V'melech yoshiv al kisei malchusay beveis hamalchuch. Malchus, the king, was sitting on the royal throne in the royal palace. Noichach Hatzvi-Bais, opposite the entrance of the house. I've showed you pictures exactly where Esther stood and where the king was sitting at that point. Says the Gemara, "Vayhi b'yom hashlishi," and on the 3rd day, "Vatilbash Esther Malchus." Esther clothed herself in royal garments. Says the Gemara, "Big day Malchus mi boile." Should have said royal garments, big day, bigadim. Instead, it says Malchus. She clothed herself in royalty. What is the Megillah telling us from the fact that didn't say the word big day, garments of royalty, and instead it says royalty. So, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi
Chanina.
Hey, very good. Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Chanina, and he says like this: Melamed comes to teach you Shalavashta Ruach HaKodesh. The spirit of prophecy, of inspiration, enclosed itself on Esther. So when we say she clothed herself with royalty, it wasn't garments of royalty, but rather to the ruach, to the spirit, which is called malchus, which is called royalty, malchus of Atzilus, as we're going to learn very soon in Kuntres Umaayon. And how do you see that the word about tilbash, and she put clothes on herself, means royalty? Because ksiv hachad, it says, written over here about tilbash, and Esther and clothed herself in royalty. Ksiv Hassam, and it says over there in Divrei Yamim, this is when David first became king, and many different soldiers came to join him. And it says, V'ruach lavshas Amasai reisha shalishim. Amasai was the chief of the captains of Shaul, told David, Shalom lecha, peace to you. V'nisha shalom, shalom, shalom to those who help you. Peace upon you to those who help you. David accepted them, and he made them captains of his troops. So when it says Ruach Lavsha, so Masai means a spirit, a higher type of spirit, a spirit of greatness. This is when David is running away from Shaul. He's hiding in a tower. People from Binyamin and Yehuda came to them. David suspected them that they were spies for Shaul, and they were just trying to find a way to capture him. So Amasai, who was the son of Abigail, who was David's sister from his mother, and he wanted to join David, and he told David, everyone over here is actually out for your good. You don't have to worry about them. So we see the word ruach, a spirit can mean ruach HaKodesh. You could say the word tilbash, getting clothed, about a ruach, about a spirit. So it says in Esther, and clothed herself in garments, it means she clothed herself in a spirit What?
He closes the Malchus.
Malchus, but Neruach. Tilmash could be Neruach, which means Ruach HaKodesh. So therefore, once we have that in a similar vein, it's the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Ephraim Margolius, son of Adel. His name is the Degel Machne Ephraim, a brother of Baruch HaMezhebush. He brings where later on in the Megillah, it says Mordechai, he uses the term Malchus, royalty, about Mordechai as well. It's one of the Peascah we say out loud. Here. Verse Tesvav, Mordechai Yatzam Lifnei Melech, Mordechai left the king's presence, Bilavush Malchus, in a royal garment. And then it lists off all the garments he had. Tcheles, a blue garment, what tzitzis is made out of. V'chor, a white garment. V'terez zahav gedola, a huge golden crown. V'sachrich butz v'argaman, a wrap of linen and purple. V'ir Shushan sala v'samechan, the city of Shushan rejoiced and was happy. So when he says Mordechai went out in front of the king, bilavush malchus, in a garment of royalty, also means Ruach HaKodesh, also means prophecy, spirit of prophecy. We know from earlier that Esther was a prophet. So here we say Mordechai was a prophet as well. And every one of the descriptions in this pasuk, in this verse, hints to prophecy. Tcheles, blue. One of the Gemara, Mesechta Menachos, says the reason why tzitzis is dyed blue is because blue is similar to the ocean. The ocean is similar to the heavens. The heavens is similar to the Kisei HaKavod, Hashem's throne of glory, which is a spirit of Kedusha, a spirit of holiness. So Tcheles, blue is going on prophecy, the Kisei HaKavod. Chor, which is white. Chor, if you spell it backwards, what do you get? Dovi. If you spell the word chor backwards, what do you get? Ruach. So chor is Ruach HaKodesh. A big, huge golden crown, Tiferes of Gedola. Also, it corresponds to in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a golden gate that was closed 6 days of the week and was only open on Shabbos. So that also corresponds to the idea of Ruach HaKodesh. Because the Yom HaShvi Pesach, on the seventh day it's open, and the seventh day the gates of the seventh Malchus, the gates of heaven are open. And so everything in this pasuk as well, in this verse, which says Mordechai wore royal garments, is also hinting to the idea of Ruach HaKodesh, of prophecy as well. Now, once we brought to Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, the Gemara, we're going to learn this tomorrow, we'll bring another 5 statements of Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. And none of them are the statements that we say at the end of Daven. We're going to have another 5 statements of Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. So now we'll continue with Kuntres Umaayon. If you want. Or Maamar 22, chapter 2. Page 315. If anybody wants an English one, it's page has it around. Want an English one? Page 315. V'hinei. We describe the Merkava, the chariot of Hashem, which had 4 faces, and each of these faces, this is a prophecy from Yecheskel, and each of these faces are the source of a different creature in the world. You have what were the four sides of the Merkava of the chariot of Hashem?
Right?
Part of that one?
Sure, yeah.
Um,
You had,
Pnei-
you had,
There he saw a storm wind coming, and he saw the image of four angelic creatures. He had the face of a man, the face of a lion on its right, the face of an ox on the left, and opposite it, the face of an eagle. And so every physical creation has a source above. We spoke about the dog of Atzilus. Remember that. The source is where it gets its life, gets its existence from. So in a very spiritual sense, these four chayas, these four beings, are the source of all living creations, all living beings. The Jew has two souls, right? So the godly soul comes from Hashem himself. It's called the Adam Sh'ala Kisei, the person which is on the throne. Then you have the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul. The animal soul comes from the form, the face of a man on Hashem's chariot, the face of a man. And that itself, we said there's Nefesh Bahamis, you have two parts. You have a Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, which is your natural emotional soul. Then you have the Nefesh HaSichlis, you have your logical part of the animal soul. That's called the Nefesh HaSichlis, the logic of the person. For example, I don't know, a person wants to go speeding fast, and your logic will tell you, no, don't do that. Or I really want to eat a lot, and your logic will tell you, don't, it's not healthy for you. Right? Something like that. That's called the Nefesh HaSichlis, the intellectual part of the animal soul, but it's called the Nefesh HaSichlis. This is what sets man unique from animals. Every person, what sets a Jew apart from the rest of the world is our Nefesh Elokis, our godly soul. So the Nefesh HaSichlis, the intellectual soul, which is unique to man, that comes from Hinei Adam, the face of a man, which is on the Merkava of Hashem. V'yadua, and it's known. The four beings of the chariot are in every single world. That's page 316. 317. Are in every single world. Mimadrega lemadrega hainu meruchnius liruchnius. And there's many myriad levels, many progressions in order for the soul, the living life, to come down. Now, the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, it's a spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. Remember, we used to go to a shul in East Liberty called Torah's Chaim, Negley Avenue. I don't know if some of you remember this. Tat in the morning had his bar mitzvah in Torah's Chaim with Rabbi Gladstein. So when they needed a minyan, and we used to go there every Shabbos to help them out. So there's one person who would come, wasn't Jewish, but he just like being in the shul, he would help out in the shul. And he would always say, there's a soul, and the soul is a spirit. He didn't say spirit, spirit. And he explained to us, what's a spirit? You blow. You can't see what you're blowing, and that's a spirit.
it was the boy who said that.
Yeah. Even the Nefesh HaBahamis, is the animal soul, is a spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. And that comes from Pnei Behema, from the face of the animal, the face of the ox on the Merkava of Hashem. The life of a animal also comes from Pnei Merkava. It's also spiritual. So in Ishtalshalus, from going from level to level, you're going from spiritual level to spiritual level. But in order to have physical, to have a physical body, like an animal, to have whether every object in the world, whether it's living, not living, growing, inanimate, it cannot be in a regular cause and effect type of way. There's two types of creation, two types of giving from one level to another level. One is called ila v'alul, cause and effect. where you say that person A, for example, has money, person B does not have money, person A gives money to person B. So person A did not make anything new. He took something he had already and he gave it to person B, and person B just received what person A had. For example, I have a feeling. Where does a feeling come from? Because I had a thought before. Where does a thought come from? Because I wanted something. So I want something, and then I had a thought, and then I have a feeling, and then I do something. But they're all connected one to the other. You can all trace it back. After I have that thought, or after I have that feeling, you do that action, yes, it looks independent, but it's just sort of revealing what was really there before. That's called ila va'alul. Yesh mi'ayin is when you can trace back the evidence, when you have the thing that exists and you can't see what came before, you can't even figure it out. And there's no connection from the thing which brought it about to what it has now. You can't even say that it has any similarity to where the source that it came from. An example would be something in this world, where it comes from, how it exists, you have no idea. Another idea is when a seed is planted in the ground, in order for the seed to grow, before it grows, it has to fall apart, it has to disintegrate in the ground. So at that stage, when there's no seed, what's there? There's no tree, there's no seed. Where is the plant coming from? It's also similar to the idea of yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing. Now, to create physical cannot be through cause and effect, because all you're going to do is spiritual thing to the next spiritual thing to next spiritual thing, but it can never hit physical. You never hit a physical idea. In order to make something physical, you have to have a complete stop, a complete break, in order to rebuild. If you have many, many levels of godliness, lo yishave ruchnius metzias gashmi. Yeah. Oh, thank you for bringing this up. I'll bring it up in a moment. You can never have anything from a spiritual thing. Can never make a physical thing. For example, you could think about something as much as you want. Will it start happening? You know, I could think right now that I don't know. I want that Aron Kodesh cover, the Pareches, to turn yellow right now. I could think and think and think and think. Nothing's ever going to happen as much as I think about it, right?
What did you say about the 23rd of Sivan?
This is a very special day. To create physical from spiritual could only come from yesh mi'ayin, from something from nothing. Now let's go back to the Megillah in Perek Ches, chapter 8.
Today's the 23rd.
Today is the 23rd of Sivan. It's a date mentioned in the Megillah.
So evil decrees are to this day actually removed.
Look at this. In chapter 9, over here. The king finally, Achashverosh goes and he tells Esther, what do you want? I killed Haman. I killed Haman. What do you want now? And Esther begged him, please save the Jews. And repeal the decree that Haman wrote to kill the Jews. And Achashverosh says, sorry, I can't do it. I can't repeal the decree. Once it's sealed, it's too late. But here's my signet ring and write whatever you want. So what happens? The king's scribes were summoned. The third month, which is the month of Sivan. On the 23rd day of the month. Chav Gimel Sivan. And it was written, whenever Mordechai wrote to the Jews, and then to all the princes and all the governors from all 127 provinces of the king, from Haidu to Cush, each according to their script and their language, in the name of the king. Now the king gave permission to give every single Jew to stand up for themselves, defend themselves, and to destroy any enemies who come to try harming them. So on the 23rd of Sivan, in Megillah, it says that the king, Achashverosh, gave permission to Mordechai to write whatever he wants. We've had, I think it was 18 different sources that we brought down in the Megillah to say how everything in the Megillah is not just a story, it's a spiritual thing. Why it's part of Tanakh. It's not just a palace intrigue that took place in Shushan. It's all metaphors for higher spiritual things. And on Thursday, we went through, for most of the hour, different explanations of the Rebbe on this chapter of the Megillah, explaining how all these things were spiritual, amazing things that are taking place, right, in the story of the Megillah. The king in the Megillah, the Zohar says, is going on. Achashverosh stands for Achrus V'Reishus Shaloi. It's standing for Hashem. With the beginning and the end, all time belongs to Hashem. On the 23rd of Sivan, which is today, Hashem, the king of the world, told Mordechai, write whatever you want for the Jews. The Jews are given permission, and it's brought down in Sichas of the Rebbe in many places, is a day that the books to nullify the decree, and shkoyach to Rabbi Levi for bringing this up. It's a very special, auspicious day for everybody to use this day. And the Rebbe says in a Sikha that anybody can write any decree that they want on this day. And Hashem will fulfill it.
As if we're all on the level of the biggest tzaddikim, apparently.
On this day, 23rd of Sivan, a Jew becomes a balabas of Envelt, the Rebbe says. You become a ruler in charge of the world and can decree whatever you want for good. And Hashem will fulfill it. It's a Sikha of the Rebbe from Chav Gimel Sivan.
As long as it's good stuff, apparently.
Use it out for the good stuff. We're encouraged to use this opportunity to the fullest, have written Shemayim that all our needs be fulfilled. It's an incredible opportunity to decree verbally for one another and for yourselves. Whoever needs a bracha should receive them b'karav mamash. We could be the authors today of our own destiny when we tap into the special energy of Hashem. So first of all, we want Mashiach now. Mashiach should come right away. Should receive all the brachas, physical, spiritual, when it is a refuah shlema.
I wonder if I could take a picture of this.
Yitzchok ben Esther, should have a refuah shlema. Yisvisam Simchasia, Baruch ben Bela, Eliyahu ben Esther Itkin, and whoever else needs it. Choda Basara, and all good in physical, spiritual, health, wealth, and all the good things. And it's a very special thing that happens on this day. And in addition, you should give coins, money. I'm not sure where every one of these come from, but all of them help to say Hatzvi-Bais of Tehillim, chapter 22. That's the capital of Tehillim Esther said when she was in the palace of Achashverosh to give coins to Staka, to read the Megillah. And Davin, Mir Hashem, will see miracles. We're going to have miracles in a revealed way.
I just want to take a picture.
Let me bring it back up.
As far as the minhagim, take a picture. Good.
So you can look up the Sikha Chaf Gimel Sivan Tafshin Mem Gimel, 23rd of Sivan, 1983. Got it?
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I guess.
So I'm going to send this to you, okay?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just going to send it to you.
I just have to go up to it in order to make it closer. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Shukayach.
I hope you sure.